Love our music. I love our intro music. How's everybody doing? Welcome to the Dynasty 365 podcast. It's the Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast for fantasyandframes.com and the ever-expanding Fantasy and Frames podcast empire. I'm Brian Ford, and I'm joined by my co-host, Tyler Heil. Tyler, how you doing?
Oh, man, I'm wonderful. Had a busy few weeks and been just as busy trying to cram some of these wide receivers and tight ends, man. There's a lot of these guys.
Yep. Yeah.
How are you, Brian?
Listen, I have a profession where, from April 15th to April 24th, I'm going to be on spring break. So, I'm kind of just limping towards the finish line, but I can't complain, right? So this week is Joe and Keith week number 2. Last week, Keith could not join us, so Jorge stepped in, but Keith is back with us tonight. Keith, how you doing?
Doing good. Apologize for missing last week. Was a little under the weather, but it did work out because it rolled right into Masters Week, which is probably my favorite week of the year. So I pretty much watched golf for 4 straight days from Thursday to Sunday, but excited to talk this receiver class, which I think can be crazy good.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah. Just crunching all the numbers here because there's a lot with it seems every wide receiver class now goes 10, 15 deep at least. So.
And Joe's in his crunching the numbers shirt in case you're not watching the live stream and listening to this on podcast form.
Right.
Button Joe up looks for this, spiffy, man. Dude.
Okay.
Yeah. Joe, why don't you button the top button too?
So then let's talk about this class, right? Like, for me, listen, it's rookie fever season, right? Like I could sell you on why my wide receiver 24 is going to be a thing, right? At the same time, though, if I'm looking realistic about things, after my first 7 to 9, a lot of guys with question marks, pretty wide range of outcomes. And for me, it's going to be very dependent on draft capital and landing spot, as it is with a lot of folks. Keith, you seem a little more confidently in love with this class.
Yeah, it's not just this class, too. Let me reiterate that. If you look, there's a real trend in the NFL. And we talk about so much how obviously the rules and stuff have been tailored to quarterbacks and offenses, and that's how the game's moving. It's also been with receivers. I mean, you go back and look at these last 2 receiving classes, particular. 2020, you obviously had Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins. But, I mean, there was 6 guys who had 50 receptions or more. You had 4 guys that had 900 yards receiving or more. And then that followed it up with almost the exact same thing in 2021, where, again, we had 7 guys with 60 or more receptions. You've got guys averaging north of 45, 50 yards a game. There were 7 of those. You had, I think it was 7 or 8 players with 5 touchdowns or more. Receivers are just being more involved immediately. And, that was for a long time a position that people said, well, yeah, you get this receiver, but wait till year 2 because there was such a learning curve. And whether that's through the college game getting a little bit more pro level and the fact that they throw and, it's not as much running in college or whatever it may be, the rule changes. I just think receivers produce more immediately. And then to look at this receiving class with all the skill sets, speed, talent. And I think teams are learning how to use guys, to where they're not almost a Bill Belichick mode, where they're not asking them to do anything more than what their skill set is. So to your point, Brian, if they land in the right spot, they can end up really being gangbuster and then, maybe not even be that good if they go somewhere else, which we've seen a lot with receivers signing in free agency in the last 5-6 years after they're, the team that they're drafted by lets them go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's get into it then. Let's get into so we're kind of going to split the wide receivers up into a couple different segments for folks. We're kind of going to cover some of the bigger names. We're going to look at some mid-range guys that we like, and then some deeper cuts that we like. So I kind of compiled like the 7 or so receivers that I see generally in people's top 7. I know for some folks on this particular broadcast, it's not necessarily true, but and so we're each going to take one of them and just kind of introduce them and what we think about them. And Tyler's going to lead us off with Garrett Wilson.
So before I get into Garrett Wilson, I have to ask a question. looking at Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jameson Williams, who also transferred from Ohio State, doesn't Ohio State have enough boosters that they can afford a squat rack? Can they get one of those guys in a squat rack? Come on, 180 pounds. They have to go to the weight room at some point, right?
In fairness, Big Ten doesn't look at, they still don't pay, their strength and conditioning guys like the SEC. That's something Saban did immediately. I've seen it with Kirby at Georgia, and it's seen a huge difference in our program. You've really got to work these kids because they're coming in as 18, 19. And to your point, Jameson Williams is the strongest of the three, who spent his last year in Alabama, not at Ohio State. So it just shows it really does matter where you play in college, how prepared you are for the NFL on so many different levels.
Yeah.
To be fair, Devonta Smith just came out of Alabama weighing like 160 pounds soaking wet. So
that's
true. True.
Yeah.
Maybe now that we're done with the size shaming, and maybe if you're out there, donate to the OSU, strength and conditioning.
No, don't
program.
do that. No.
I'm sure they're starving for money.
No.
Tyler, tell us about Garrett Wilson.
All right, so Garrett Wilson is, he very likely might be my number one wide receiver when all is said and done, regardless of the size issues. He's 6 foot tall. He's 183. So he's not a tiny guy when it comes to height, at least. He has an opportunity to put on some extra weight when he gets into an NFL strength and conditioning program. And really, I think I said it last week, get some sand in his pants.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's a great route runner. He has really good body control, which is kind of weird because he looks kind of out of control at times, but he's not. So I was watching film, and I think the prevailing thing before the combine was, we'll see if Garrett Wilson can break a 4.5. This is going to be the big question mark for him. Can he keep up with these guys? And I watched this film. I'm like, what are these people looking at? This dude can move. There was never a question that he is fast. He's beating people on deep routes. He's cutting at the top of his routes. He stems really well. He doesn't round at the top of his routes. Honestly, I really like him. He comes to the top of his routes with this beautiful striding move where the cornerback doesn't know if he's going to go deep or if he's going to sit down or he's going to run into the middle of the field or run a dig route. And he can get open really well. He might not be the route runner that Chris Olave is, his teammate, but that dude can run a route. He can get open. He can catch. And on top of all that, he's got some bounce. He can jump up and high point a ball when he needs to. He might not be like a, spoiler alert, a Drake London, like this huge contested catch guy, but I really like him. I'm really excited to see where he lands.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm feeling good about him.
Right on. So let me talk then about what some people are saying is the anti-Garrett Wilson, and that's Treylon Burks, whereas Garrett Wilson is well-rounded and polished and a very good route runner. People are characterizing Treylon Burks out of Arkansas, 6'2", 225, as sort of a more raw athlete that needs to work on, refining some of those route running skills, which, I agree with. I think the thing was all he needs to do is go into the combine and not, run a bad 40. The 40 was 4.55, whatever that's worth. I think, some people gave him a ding on that. For whatever it's worth, he lit up Alabama.
He's 220 pounds, 4'5" at 220 is different.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. I think it's overblown. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think he's perhaps a bit of a project, and not like a developmental, but it might take him a little while to really see the field a lot to be able to produce the way we think he can once he does refine those skills. I think he's, going to be a weekly starter for your dynasty team, wide receiver 1 on your team upside. And it just depends on, where he lands and how he's going to get coached up. And, for what it's worth, there are some people who are knocking him a lot. And, dropping him down their boards. So he's still within the top tier for me. Keith, Jameson Williams.
I can't love this guy anymore. Jameson Williams is a absolute unicorn. Is going to be day one in the NFL. Averaged 19.6 yards per catch last season at Alabama. You're like, okay, guys have done that on 94 receptions. I mean, think about that. To have 94 receptions and basically average 20 yards per catch is just, he's sick. He is lightning in a bottle at all times. And what's great about this guy is we know he has world track speed, ran a 10.54 100-meter dash. Obviously, we didn't get the 40 time, but we know roughly what a 100-meter dash at that speed would score out to in the 40, and it'd be somewhere in the 4.29, 4.32 range. So, I mean, he's going to fly. And what I love about him is obviously he can beat you deep, and he proved that over and over again. But he is without a doubt the best receiver in this class after the catch, led college football and yards after the catch. I mean, just go watch his tape. He can burn you on a 60-yard fly pattern, and then he can take a 5-yard hitch or a 5-yard slant. And if you don't get your hands on him and get him to the ground quickly, bye. Like, he is gone. You do not see receivers at his size, because he is, 6'2", 6'3", that has, the speed, the size. He's a great route runner. He can break tackles by juking. He can run through smaller defenders, which he looks for contact. He's been a good blocker while out at Alabama. And obviously, I think that, we joked about them all being at Ohio State, and I agree. But you can't tell me that this was the product that you saw at Ohio State and he was not seeing the field. I don't believe that. So it shows he can be coached up. He transferred to Alabama, and look how much he improved in 1 year. I would hope when he goes to the NFL again, he's going to keep improving. I just think obviously the concern is the injury. I mean, that's really the only thing, because I believe if he would not have gotten hurt in the national championship game, he would absolutely be the number one receiver off the board. I don't even think it would be a question. And then you got also, he does have some issues with the way he catches balls down the field. He tends to let the ball kind of get into his body, which we know that can create turnovers, especially at the pro level where you got ball hawks at safeties and corners everywhere. But I said Drake London was the receiver that I think is most likely to see, because I just think with his size and his ability to catch radius, all that stuff. But if it wasn't for Jameis's injury, if you're taking away, I don't have to worry about injuries moving forward. I think he is the, can't miss guy of this draft and has the highest upside. I think this guy's a freak. And if Kansas City is smart, go get him, and you basically replace Tyreek Hill, right after you let him go, and got a guy just as explosive.
Wow. Okay. Joe, tell us about Ohio State's Chris Olave.
All right, so I'll talk about one of the guys who forced Jalen Williams to transfer there, which is Chris Olave, smoothest route runner of the top 5 in this class, if not the entire class. He's a guy who showed out sophomore year at Ohio State and has carried it through every single season, led the team in receiving yards as a sophomore and junior, touchdowns 3 years straight. And another burner, 4.39 at the combine. But he actually only ran it once because somehow the unofficial time was a 4.26. So he was just like, I'm good. So there's a chance he runs faster than a 4.39 if he runs the second one. So he can move. To Tyler's point, these Ohio State receivers are slight. He's 6 foot, 187. But he caught 63% of his contested targets this season. Only Drake London was better on contested catches in this class. So he may be small, but he's good at the point of reception. One real issue I have with him, one forced missed tackle on 65 receptions this last year. That is the worst missed tackle rate among all receivers in this class. So he's not doing a lot after the catch, but there may not be anyone better at getting open before it. His best case is probably like a Calvin Ridley with more straight line speed is kind of how I see Chris Olave.
Why you got to bring up Calvin Ridley, Joe?
All right. And speaking of Drake London and contested catches, Tyler.
All right. So I got a chance to watch some Drake London, and, I wasn't super high on him just because of the people that I heard talking about him. Big guy, contested catch guy, and it just kind of gives me flashbacks. I'm like, oh, N'Keal Harry. Like it just didn't feel good when I heard about these things. But I did make sure I took the chance to actually watch him play, and the dude's good. I mean, he's not going to be this guy that comes out of the top of his route and blows by people and separates like crazy. That's just not the type of player he is. He can get out there. He can run a good route. He has super strong hands. He catches all kinds of balls in traffic over the middle. He's not scared of going over the middle. He'll catch the ball, take a hit, and shake off that tackle. He does a really good job with breaking those tackles. Oh, I don't think I mentioned how big he actually is. He's 6'4", 220 pounds.
He's going to be a problem.
Yes, that is. That's Mike Evans size. I've heard some people compare him to Mike Evans. I don't know if he necessarily has the athleticism and the top speed of Mike Evans, but he has a lot of the abilities that he does that Mike Evans has.
I think he plays bigger though with his catch radius and stuff. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, he kind of, see him jumping over people. It looks like a pterodactyl. It's really fun to watch, actually. But yeah, I mean, and when I said I thought of N'Keal Harry, the way people were talking about him, I had to remind myself, like, okay, that's just one example. Like, let's go back to the 2020 class when you're talking about big guys. You're talking about Michael Pittman, who was 6'4", T. Higgins, who was 6'3.5", Chase Claypool, who was over 6'4". Like, all of these guys are big dudes that aren't necessarily going to run away from you, but they know how to get open, and they can catch contested balls, possibly not even as good as Drake London is capable of doing. So there's a battle for my wide receiver one, and not just between Wilson and Drake London, but I like a lot of these guys here at the top.
Yeah, they're I've seen them interchangeable in a lot of ways. The first few here. So before we get to Keith doing Pickens, all right, just want to say, Keith, he is a bulldog, and this is a 1-hour show. Okay, so let's.
Since I missed last week, can I start with how James Cook should be high on your Dynasty running back rankings? I'm sorry. So George Pickens, really big receiver, 6'3", $195. People do not forget that this time last year, before his ACL injury, everybody says George Pickens will be the number one receiver in this class. He obviously tore his ACL. He also had some off the field issues, which that's not helping him either. But a lot of people have argued that he underproduced at Georgia. And if you look at the numbers, okay, I'll give you that. Like that, I guess that's fair if you're just going strictly by the numbers. But remember, Georgia has had at least 4 running backs have 35 carries the last 5 seasons under Kirby Smart. So we're going to run the ball a lot. And then on top of that, the 2 guys that have thrown the football to him, Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett, which are both game managers. God bless them both. But they're both game managers. Neither one of them are somebody who's just going to open it up, sling it downfield, let it rip, which is where Pickens would just really shine with his game. He's a really good route runner, very smooth. He uses his physicality. He's very strong in his hands and his arms. He does a great job of getting separation from defenders. The thing that I love about him more than anything, though, is he blocks out defenders better than any receiver in football. And if you go watch his tape, receivers at this age usually don't get that it's like, I got to help my quarterback and my team on these passes. And if you watch, he pays attention always to where the defender who is on him is at all times. And he does a great job of preventing him from making a play. And again, with Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett, I've seen him save several interceptions in his time there. He's an above average blocker. Unfortunately, there's times he looks disinterested, which again, all of my big questions about Pickett are all about, I mean, how bad do you want this dude? You know what I mean? Is this just something where you want to be a pro player, or is this something where you want to be one of the best? Because I think if he gives you that dedication, he can really shine at the next level. But he is going to, in my opinion, be the best just outside receiver in this class. Because you got to remember, Drake London will be right there with him too. But Drake played in the slot predominantly in college. All these other guys that you were mentioning played a lot in the slot. Pickens was constantly on that outside. He knows how to run routes out there, how to be that kind of receiver. And I think best case, he's going to be a chunk player because he does not do great after the catch, but he's such a big, good receiver and great at running routes that he's going to be able to get plenty of yardage and kind of help offenses move the ball. Somebody like Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, I think this would be a perfect pick for them, say in the second or third round, depending if he falls a little bit. I really do like Pickens. Again, this class is just really deep with guys that have a lot of physical and athletic abilities that usually lead to being good wide receivers in the NFL.
Right on. And, that leaves us with one more, and that'll be Jahan Dotson. Out of Penn State, I've seen him climbing up the mocks and seems to be projected as even a late first rounder recently. 4.4340, good route runner, good hands. One of these quicker than he is fast sort of players that we describe a lot. Is good at yak, 87.2 PFF grade with a meh quarterback at Penn State. And I think he's maybe a bit undersized. I have him listed at 178. I think ESPN has him listed in the 180s, but I think either way he's going to be a solid starter. That's sort of a safe play for folks, and probably like the wide receiver 2 on your dynasty team, but but still definitely somebody I'm looking at in rookie drafts. So now we get to the fun part. Those are the names that you've probably all heard of already. And our take on the top guys. Now we get to dig a little deeper and talk about guys that are a little further down the ranks in general that we like and we want to highlight and put on your radar. And if they are on your radar, maybe even expand on them a little bit. So, Joe, you only got to do one of the big guys. Why don't you tell us about David Bell to kick us off?
Yeah, so David Bell is a guy I was high on pre-combine, and then he was, if you've seen his combine numbers, everyone will know he was one of the big losers of the combine. 4.65 in the 40. His pro day did not help. He ran in the 4.7s. So this is not a burner. He's not keeping up with the Ohio State guys. But what made me feel better about him is I looked up his comps. Top comp on Player Profiler was Anquan Bolden. And then PFF does a series where they look at top comps of the top 10, 15 receivers. Their number one based on production and athletic ability was Keenan Allen. So it's a reminder, production tends to be more telling than pure athleticism, as the Chicago Bears could tell you with Kevin White, and there's a million other examples of that.
John Ross,
absolutely.
Sorry, I had to.
Corey Coleman, yeah, there's plenty of examples of speed is not everything. Good size, good production, 6'1", 212. He weighed in at the combine, forced 25 missed tackles last season. Only Sky Moore in this receiver class forced more. And the other thing I love about him is the production came quick. This is not a guy who waited till his junior year to break out. Freshman year, over 1,000 yards, true freshman in the Big Ten. And he's playing at Purdue. He's not a guy who is surrounded by talent and he just found ways. He was the guy all 3 years as a, sophomore year, obviously the shortened season, but over the last 2 years, over 100 yards receiving a game. And my favorite thing looking into this was you worry about, is this guy just going to be contested catches? He's going to get to the pros, can't get it done. His contested target percentage in off coverage was 15.9%. So that's 16% of the time when he was in off coverage, it ended up being a contested when he was thrown to. That's 0.3% better than Chris Olave, who again ran a 4.39. So he's a guy who finds ways to get open. He's, he may not have the ceiling of obviously the guys who run in the 4.3s, but I would not be shocked if he has a Michael Crabtree-like career in the NFL. I'm big on him, especially if that slow 40 causes him to fall in the draft. I think he's a great value for a team. And I think he can be a great value in fantasy drafts because people are going to get scared by that 40 time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, to me that was a bit of double counting. I think entering the combine, we kind of knew
Yeah,
he
he
wasn't
wasn't.
super athletic. Yeah. Tyler, you got two you'd like to highlight. I think there's a good reason to touch on both of them, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a nice little transition here because Joe mentioned Sky Moore, who's the only guy who forced more missed tackles. And it makes sense because when I watch Sky Moore, I'm a little confused. Number one, he wears number 24. That doesn't sit well with me. I don't like it. He needs to put a teen on or an 80 on and move on. Get that 2 off of your jersey.
And I'm 44, so it needs to be in the 80s.
But it makes sense. He plays a lot like a wide receiver. Or a running back. I'm sorry. He's built a lot like a running back. So when you look at him just on the screen, he really does look like it. But Sky Moore's a guy that he's almost 5'10". He's 5'9.5", 195 pounds. He ran a 4.4 140. So he has athleticism for days. He was first team All-MAC twice. The first time he was All-MAC was his freshman year. Broke out at a young age. He checks all those boxes for early declare, good BMI, early production, all of that stuff that I know a lot of people really pay attention to when they're judging these wide receivers coming out. He runs really good routes. I already mentioned he looks like a running back when he gets the ball. And, Western Michigan agreed with me because he didn't run a lot of deep routes. He caught very few passes that were over 20 yards. He would have a lot of plays where he would just turn to the quarterback and start backpedaling until he just got him the ball and let him make something happen. So they really believed in him getting the ball in space. I don't want to make this comparison because it's not fair, but I will say when I watched him, I was like, oh, that kind of reminds me a little bit of Deebo Samuel. He's not that guy. He isn't, but he is a guy that you can put in the backfield and you can run jet sweeps with and give him the ball behind the line of scrimmage and let him make something happen. And the other big thing with Sky Moore is he's in the no Kenny Pickett's club.
Yes.
He has 10 1/4 inch hands. Kenny Pickett can only dream of that, man.
Yes, biggest hands in the class.
Yeah.
The next guy you're going to tell us about, I am really intrigued by because entering the process, I kind of had him generally where folks had him due to something that you're gonna talk about him with the injuries, and I'm starting to see a little bit more reason for me to maybe think about raising him up. So tell us about it.
So yeah, you're talking about Justin Ross out of Clemson. So this is a guy that also super highly ranked athlete coming out of high school. He's a 5-star recruit. And you could see that because for anyone that watched that 2019 Clemson season or 2018 Clemson season, whichever it was, including that national championship, Justin Ross was just a monster. Him and Trevor Lawrence were absolutely dominating people. I mean, he's a big dude. He's 6'3". But he's not just 6'3". He is an athlete. He can run good routes. He can get sync in his routes. He can separate from people, and that can be hard to find when you're talking about big, tall guys that can actually separate. He fell down quite a bit. He had a spinal injury that was career threatening. It makes sense why he fell down. He had a spinal injury, had other foot injuries going forward. So the guy that I thought of when I was looking at his profile, kind of, it's not necessarily injury related, but Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's a super highly ranked guy coming out of high school, has all the physical tools, 6'2", 6'3", can run fast, can jump high, all that good stuff. DPJ was a little different because he didn't produce in college because his quarterbacks were absolute dog duty. Ross got a chance to play with Trevor Lawrence for a while. He's still, I wouldn't take him in the top 10 of this class. I like other wide receivers better, but he is absolutely worth a flyer going, maybe back of the second, early third in a rookie draft, and take a shot on him. But it also all depends on landing spot if he's going to go to a place that gives him a shot.
Okay. Keith, why don't you tell us about one of the smaller guys that you like, Calvin Austin?
You mean Mighty Mouse?
Yes.
Calvin Austin was a guy that I was pretty high on before the combine. When you watch him play, I always love when you have these small, and he is very undersized. He's 5'8", about 100, I think 82 pounds. Obviously can, stop on a dime, juke, can obviously burn by people, but he reminds me a little bit like a Steve Smith type guy, that he is not afraid to go up and bang with corners and safeties for contested balls, which with, little guys, a lot of times they shrink the more the coverage condenses on them. And if they're not in open space, they're just not the same players. He doesn't appear to be that. But his combine was just insane. He ran a 4.3240. He broad jumped over 11 feet. He's 5'8". Like, what the? Anyway, his numbers at the combine, and again, this is where people probably be like, come on. They're basically identical to Tyreek Hill. They're basically the exact same height, the exact same size. Now, I'm not saying that he is going to be Tyreek Hill. I mean, obviously, if I was a GM, I'd take Tyreek Hill light if that's what he ends up being. But the fact that his numbers are so close to Tyreek Hill, it means that that is the kind of potential that you could see in him. Because like with Tyreek Hill in college, just scores and scores and scores. He had 20 touchdowns over his last 2 seasons, or 24 total, 20 receiving touchdowns. Really has a nose for the end zone. That was evident by he only had 1 carry this year, 69 yards for a touchdown. I mean, he's just somebody that finds a way to get into the end zone. And if you look at the NFL now, more and more of these small, shifty slot receivers. First it was New England for years who did it, and that was basically it. Now all teams seem to have these guys like the Hunter Renfrows and stuff of the world, where they want these guys that work primarily out of slot, and they're really just to pick up yards here and there. Absolute worst case, I think that's what Calvin Austin can be, because he's a good route runner too. But I think that if you put him with, like, say, a Josh McDaniels, so I think that would be a perfect landing spot for him, a Mike Shanahan, Arthur Smith, guys that have proven that they're going to take an athlete and put them in positions that are going to make them succeed and really stretch and scare a defense. I think he has real boom potential. So particularly like in dynasty drafts, I have him higher than even some of these guys that I would have higher on the draft board, just because I think that his ceiling for fantasy purposes could end up being much larger than his ceiling for as just a draft pick or prospect in the NFL, especially again if it's a PPR league.
And one thing to remember about Austin, if I'm not mistaken, he returned punts, kicks, right?
Yeah, he does both. Yep.
Yeah. So, and that's when you can do special teams and do it well, you're gonna stay on a roster, and you might get a chance. So, let's see. I'm gonna round us out here with these mid-range guys, and I got a few I could go to. I'm gonna highlight just real quick that I think John Mechie isn't getting enough love. ACL recovery withstanding. I think I think he's kind of slipping when people are kind of falling in love with the Sky Moores and the Christian Watsons and things like that. And I don't know. I think it maybe is a little unfair. I want to talk about Jalen Tolbert. He is somebody who, before the combine, kind of early in the process, I saw some people talk about him as a draft steal, both in the NFL and in fantasy rookie draft. So I looked into him more and more. Right now, he's projected to be a third-round pick, according to NFL Mock Draft database. I think for me to be as interested in him later as I am now, I'm going to need to see that day 2 draft capital. But we have a guy 6'1", 195, so not small. 4.49 40, not slow. He's got good hands, but he does have concentration drops. He gets good separation, especially deep. One thing to think about, though, is, again, the group of 5 competition level, and he's going to need to get coached up, because he wasn't coached by the SECs and the Big Tens and that sort of thing when it comes to, everything about being a player, including a route running. Was number 7 in yards per route run, with as far as all 2022 wide receivers with 50 targets or more. Again, he's a guy I'm been excited about, and he's kind of a my guy, but I'm tempering expectations that on your dynasty roster, he's going to be a wide receiver 3 or a flex. And then I just want to shout out Alec Pierce, who really rose after the combine at 6'3" with a 4.41. Got good hands, pretty good route runner, but could use some tweaks. Is probably going to have a limited route tree in the NFL. And again, you're thinking of, the group of 5 competition. Could be a red zone threat. Depends. So he's projected also in the 3rd round. And, again, I think has that wide receiver 3 flex sort of profile on your dynasty roster. So now it's time for deep cuts. Everybody knows I like my deep cuts. Sometimes a little too much, but if you're in a rookie draft, right, and you have 4 or 5 rounds, you have to pick people. You have to throw the darts, right? And so we're going to talk about, some folks who, might be borderline dart throw, that we like, that are a little lower down in the ranks. So let's see. Tyler, why don't you go first?
All right, I'll jump in with guy from Nevada, and I just like his name in general, Romeo Doubs. He was super productive in college. He was a leading receiver on that team more often than not in his 4-year career. He's really good at stretching the field. He's a nice downfield threat. He didn't get a chance to run this 40 due to a knee injury, but he's 6'2", 201 pounds. So he's a good sized receiver. Watching him play, just kind of the way he ran, kind of a longer, skinnier guy, reminded me a little bit of Marvin Jones. He was able to break out at a young age and stayed productive throughout his college career. Another big thing that I'm seeing about him is just he's a great teammate. He's a team captain. He's all business. So to go back to what you said, Brian, is, you're not going to hit home runs typically in the 4th round of your rookie draft. Sometimes you just need to get guys that are going to be nice bye-week fill-ins or good wide receiver 3s or good flexes. And I think Romeo Doubs has a chance to be that guy. Now, I'm not going to go out here and say he's going to be a wide receiver 1 for a team, because let's be real, he's not. Mm-hmm. He can fill a spot on your roster and occasionally get into your starting lineup and be useful.
Okay. Joe, why don't you go next? I have 30 receivers ranked. And again, this is all still in process, and post-draft, I'm going to re-rank them. This guy is my 30th. Tell me about your guy.
All right. So the reason why Kyle Phillips of UCLA is much higher than 30th on mine. I mean, I see why he's 30th. Let's go through the negatives first. He's 5'11", 189. He has under 30-inch arms, and he ran a 4.58 40. So this is a pure slot guy. He doesn't have the speed or the size to play on the outside. But he led UCLA in receptions 3 straight years. For senior wide receivers, I always want to see production. It's that sophomore year or freshman year if it's a guy like Justin Ross. I want to see that they didn't have to just become older than everybody, and that's when they produced. Again, leading guy sophomore year at UCLA, led the team in yards 2 of 3 seasons. Later on in this pod, we'll get to the guy who led them the other year. And 10 scores this last year, so 10 touchdowns. He's a guy who just finds openings. And one of the great route runner, Mike Renner of PFF, gave him a 9 out of 10 in route running. And even though he doesn't have that long speed, he's super quick. He ran a 4.09 shuttle, 6.75 3-cone. The only guy in this class who did both of those and beat both those times was Calvin Austin.
That's right.
Keith just listed as like the most athletic guy in this entire group of receivers. Also a guy who's going to produce on special teams. 26 punt returns in his career at UCLA, 19.3 yards per punt return, 2 scores. So this is a guy who just finds a way to produce. If you're playing in a non-PPR league, ignore him. He will never be of use to you. But he's going to get, if he gets the opportunity, I think he's one of those little white guys who finds openings in the zone. and gets you 6 receptions for 55 yards, and you got double-digit points. So I think he's a useful guy who's going to get drafted on day 2.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna have to look into him more. I'm intrigued.
Joe the Brain.
Keith, keeping in a theme with your folks who are small of stature tonight, why don't you tell us about your deep cut?
So, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, but Wandell, I believe, Robinson, who I know that, for the college press books and stuff, they get a little cocky with their height and weight, but he was listed at 5'11", 185. He measured at 5'8", 178. So 3 inches is tough to buy. It's like, what were you wearing? Heels? Like, I mean, what was going on here? But the young man played running back at Nebraska in 2019 and 2020. He was explosive despite having he had 40 carries his freshman year, 51 his sophomore, averaged 11 yards per carry his freshman year, 9 yards as sophomore. So you're already seeing the explosiveness with the ball in his hand, but he also caught a lot of passes while he was there. Got wise, got out of Nebraska, decided to transfer to Kentucky. The women are much more beautiful there. And in the SEC where the football's a lot better and the weather's better, and just went bananas. Kentucky was smart enough to realize that this guy is a playmaker. Why would we limit to him being a running back? They lined him up all over the field. He only had 7 carries for Kentucky, but he turned him into 111 yards. So again, this guy is just a freak when he gets the ball in his hand. And his last 5 games, when Kentucky really kind of figured out how to unleash him, 13 receptions for 166 yards versus Tennessee, 6 for 75 versus Vandy, 8 for 181 versus New Mexico State, 9 for 97 versus Louisville, and 10 for 170 in the bowl game versus Iowa. I love these guys, especially I think there's a chance Robinson, as much as he's not going to like to hear this, he's the guy that's probably going to get lined up at back a good bit in the NFL, because if you draft him and you see, okay, you were averaging 10 yards a carry in college, we're going to use you probably in some third down passing situations as a running back, and also as a guy that we're going to occasionally give the football to run with, because when you have somebody that's this explosive, even with them being undersized, get them the ball in space, let them do their thing. That's the reason, particularly again in dynasty leagues, I'm big on these guys. I love these guys that are going to play a lot of slot and also just have big time explosiveness like he does, could line up a little bit all over, running back, wide receiver. I just think that there's value in there because he's probably going to make the roster and has a good chance to contribute, especially if you get with one of these more creative play callers.
Right on. Yeah, definitely somebody who could shine like that, despite the stature, with his role in the offense. So I'm going to round this out here. Going to quickly shout out Danny Gray out of SMU, projected 4th rounder with 4.33 speed. Has good hands. Needs to work on a few things like elusiveness and blocking, but I'm hearing that he's rising up the boards for real life NFL teams, and we have to pay attention to that. One guy that I do want to highlight, and I've been kind of dismissed by speaking about this guy before, is that's Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor. He's projected to go in the 5th round. And again, we're talking about, these are the last couple rounds of your rookie draft. But 4.28 speed, good blocker, good yak, needs to tighten up his route running. I think early on in this process, if he got day 2 capital, I'd definitely be watching him a little bit more. It looks like lately I'm seeing that he's not going to, but is, I think, at 6'2", 181, not a bad size speed combo and a guy to keep our eyes on. I think, he kind of has a wide range of outcomes, wide receiver flex, wide receiver 3 or flex, or probably a bench piece. But maybe could sniff a little bit more if he gets coached up a little bit in the right system. So, okay. Let's now talk real quick about the wide receivers in rookie drafts. I'm seeing a lot of them go before 109, and I've even seen first rounds with like 7 or 8 wide receivers going. But I also think to myself, well, don't despair because of the depth of the wide receivers and the fact that the running backs and quarterbacks are lackluster at that range after that range in the draft, especially, you can probably still pick up yourself up a good one in the second round. Any other thoughts on rookie draft strategy with wide receivers this year?
This might be a hot take because I'm still kind of getting my feet wet at Dynasty, but outside of Hall, and I guess maybe you could say Willis for the upside, being a running quarterback, there's like 5 receivers in this class that I like more than any other running backs or quarterbacks. And I think it's more likely they end up being a big part of your team moving forward compared to those. So, I mean, is that crazy to basically, like, if I was ranking the players just straight out, it would probably be Hall, Willis, and then I would have those top 5 receivers all in a row next, because I think those guys are a good level above the rest of them, even with the other talented guys in this class.
I don't think you're crazy at all, man. I mean, I would argue to get maybe Kenneth Walker in there, but after these top guys, it's going to be really reliant upon draft capital and landing spots for a lot of these rankings. And when you have a solid wide receiver group like this one, and you have a weak running back, quarterback, and tight end class, they're going to go fast. There's just no avoiding it.
Speaking of weak tight end class, let's now go into the wasteland that is fantasy football tight ends. So let's move to sort of the one who sort of is head and shoulders above the rest, and then everybody's kind of sorting everything out. Let's talk about Trey McBride.
I got to admit, guys, I've been trying to get these receiver, running back, and quarterback profiles up on the site, and I have not really got into tight ends. And obviously, I knew about McBride because he's been the number 1 tight end off the board for, weeks, months at this point. But just looking into him, I am a fan. 6'3", 249 pounds. If you were going to create a tight end in a lab, it would look like McBride. He is so athletic for his size. And when I say athletic, this dude holds his school record at his high school for most points scored in a basketball game, in a basketball career, most home runs at his high school for baseball. He also was an all-state wrestler. He plays the game like I drive bumper cars, where he is just looking for contact in every single direction, initiating it everywhere. And prior to the last decade, this was something all successful tight ends did. And if you look at somebody obviously like Gronk and other guys that still play that physical style, it can still be very successful. We've kind of moved more to the Kyle Pitts type tight ends that are not this, but he is the kind of guy that he is going to look for contact, try to bully people. And he's the best blocker in this tight end class. He is an unbelievable blocker. I've read in some places that they're not sure where he would, qualify with like the tackles and guards if you made him just an offensive lineman, because he's been that good. The fact that he's very balanced, he uses his wrestling background, he knows about maintaining leverage and technique. And then again, he's got the size. His one weakness is he's limited in the routes he can run. And let's be honest, he's just so big. He's 6'3", 249 pounds. You're not going to see a guy really be able to juke or run a lot of these, complicated routes, but he's going to get open by using his size, using his physicality. And we've seen over and over again, not to keep comparing to like Gronk or Pat Freiermuth, but these guys, if you can manhandle people, you're going to get open. And I really believe he's going to do this. The biggest issue I think would be if he is drafted by the wrong offense or is asked to do too much as a wide receiver. You could see him disappoint, but I love this guy. And I think any team that wants to improve their run game and needs a tight end should take him as early, starting in the second round as need be. Because if I'm like the Packers, the Bucks, or the Rams, who all 3 need help, offensive line, except for the Packers, obviously, but they need a lot of receiving help. And obviously, I think the Packers probably will run more with all their receivers gone. So it's just an extra blocker in that condition. McBride can make an impact immediately with blocking at a minimum, and they could become a real passing weapon, by playoff time, which it's rare you see a guy that looks like a man amongst boys. And from everything I've read about him, he knows he's a man amongst boys, and he's going to come in and just basically try to break shit. And I'm a big fan. Like I had only seen a little bit about him, more I've read, and not even to get his personal stuff, but if you look at the family and where he comes from, it's crazy. He's like one of like 7 kids to 2 different mothers. It's a neat story. He's an unbelievable athlete, and I think he's just going to get bigger and stronger and really be a freak at the next level.
Okay. Right on. And Joe, let's now start talking about non-McBride tight ends that we maybe also like. You're going to tell us about one out of UCLA that you mentioned before.
Yeah, apparently I'm really in on the Bruins this year, which I didn't know till like 2 days ago. But Greg Dulcich from UCLA, 3-star receiver coming out of high school. And it makes sense watching him. On the downside, he's a little bit undersized to be an inline tight end, 6'4", 243, but that only matters potentially for a snap count. You're drafting him to be a wide receiver, basically, in your offense. Moved all over the formation for Chip Kelly, 4.69 40, 7.053 cone. Traylon Burks ran a 7.28, and so did Dotson. So his 3 cone is competitive with most receivers. 33 3/8 arm. So for people who don't know, if you have over 33-inch arms, that's a big help at wide receiver, tight end, at the catch point. And I mean, my favorite thing about him is he stretches the field. 68 receptions for 1,242 yards the last 2 seasons. That's 18.3 yards per catch at tight end on real volume. 37 targets last year, 10 plus yard throws. So this is a guy who can hit every part of the field, all 3 parts of it. He's going to stretch it for you. So I think he's the number 2 tight end for me, pretty clearly.
He is for me too. Why don't you tell us about Jeremy Ruckert?
Yeah, so I went a little deeper with this one because no one seems to be talking about Jeremy Ruckert at all. I went to Ohio State. He did not catch many balls because the Ohio State offense did not want or need to use a tight end between Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So, don't hold his production against him. No. He did not test due to injury, so there's another mark against him. It's a big projection with this guy. He's a gifted athlete. He's got great hands. He's an aggressive run blocker. They used him inline a lot at Ohio State. He's one of the – I'm not going to go crazy on him like Keith did on McBride, but he's one of the better blockers in this class. They just didn't really need to use him. He's built really well. He should develop as a receiver. He's a developmental option. The one thing I will throw out about Jeremy Ruckert is he was a wide receiver in high school. He's a guy that knows how to catch the ball. He caught the ball for over 3,000 yards receiving in high school. He was New York State's Gatorade Player of the Year. He was the number 1 overall player in New York State in recruiting. He was the number 2 tight end that year behind your guy, Brian, Brevin Jordan. So he was a highly sought-after recruit, and he chose OSU. And, was it a good choice for that offense that he landed in? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But he is at least going to stick on a team because he is a good run blocker. And a lot of teams are trying to run the ball a little more and go against this too high defense trend going on in the NFL right now and try to battle it that way. So he's going to make a team. He's going to get on the field because he's going to be a solid blocker, which in turn will hopefully give him more opportunity to run routes and prove that he is an athlete and he can catch the ball.
Okay, and I'll just round us out just by quickly saying, people are kind of tired of me talking about Jelani Woods. So 2 other folks who have their flaws but are deeper cuts, Chigoziem Okonkwo and Grant Castleterra with an interesting injury history that he might otherwise be a higher pick. So that just about does it for us with wide receivers and tight end and rookies. Joe and Keith, why don't you give us where folks can find your work and what you're working on the site?
You can find me at Joe E. Matz. That's Joe with an extra E at the end, M-A-T-Z. I still need, you guys are doing all the work right now. I still need to do something here because
Frickin' slacker.
Keith's holding up our end of the pod universe at Fantasy and Frames with the mad production.
Sorry, lost you there for a second, Joe. You can find me at Keith Fleming on Twitter, all spelled out, and just doing articles. The last of my running backs, James Cook, will come out hopefully the next 2 days, and then on to the quarterbacks, and studying for the daily fantasy season.
Right, Keith and others have really been putting in the work on those prospect profiles. Tyler, where can we find you?
They can find me at FF Tyler Heil on Twitter. That's HEIL. And they will also be able to see some more work coming out on fantasyandframes.com here coming up soon. I'm going to be releasing some of these rookie prospect profiles for your reading pleasure.
All right. You can find me at FFJunkie_ on Twitter. I will be on a Twitter Spaces tomorrow night at 9:30 Eastern, talking Dynasty strategy with a few other folks. Always go to fantasyandframes.com for articles and other content about a lot of stuff that we've been talking about tonight and elsewhere. I will be doing some Dynasty Target articles soon that will roll out. Important to highlight the FIF Pod Network Twitter, where you can find all the podcasts, including the IDP podcast called Shoot the Gap, which is going to premiere on April 21st with two of our new framers, Mike Woolert and Hollywood Titan. And that about does it for us. That's a wrap. Thanks for being here.
See ya.
Take care.
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.